you place all 6 million cultural events that had been published in the last 10 years on global platforms like Meetup, Behance and TED, you will see this. At first glance, it looks as if all global cultural events are still concentrated in larger cities like New York, London, Paris or Moscow. This was true before, but the last decade showed some surprising trends that went largely unnoticed. Not only are there more smaller cities visible on the global cultural map than ever before, but we see more and more cultural events happening outside of the traditional world cultural centers. What else can we learn about contemporary global culture with the help of big data?
I'm Lev Menovich. I'm directing a big data project called Elsewhere for University of Tyumen.
Lev Menovich is a pioneer in using computational methods to study contemporary culture. He's been developing tools to analyze and visualize massive cultural data sets in humanities since the early 2000s.
But I think originally the idea came to me in 2005. So it took about almost 15 years to get ready to do this.
Elsewhere is the first project of the Cultural Trends Lab that was opened in the University of Tyumen in 2018 to tackle something nobody has done before.
The idea of the project is to collect various public data, to put it together, and to use techniques from artificial intelligence and data science to make the first maps, and also to see how contemporary culture grew up since the end of Cold War over the last 30 years.
The core idea of the Elsewhere project is based on the fact that people's understanding of how contemporary culture is spreading across the world is distorted. We simply don't know the real picture.
How many creative clusters, theaters, exhibitions, designers, nobody knows.
One of the reasons why our understanding of global culture is limited is that a small number of world capitals were always getting disproportional amounts of attention.
You always read about Moscow and Zurich and New York and Beijing. So what about Ufa, Tyumen? What about hundreds of thousands of cities which have somewhere between 200,000 and 1 million people?
In the mid-2000s, the rise of global platforms for organizing cultural events such as Behance, Meetup and TED and many others made those smaller cities visible globally for the first time in their history.
I'm Ruslan Dohov, and I do spatial temporal analyses of global cultural events and their evolution on the world map. These platforms have led to the beginning of cultural globalization developing not in isolation, but globally up front.
By the end of the 2010s, such platforms spread across the planet, and the numbers of events announced on them became big enough to be analyzed.
In this project, we extracted all the names, all the cities from a data set, which has 6 million events, starting around 2007. And when we did analysis, we found that there are names of 47,000 cities of different size being mentioned, and it's 144 countries.
But how does one analyze 6 million events appearing on platforms that are different in size, structure, language and geography? How can one unify this data? Questions like these are the exact reason why before Elsewhere, nobody even tried to analyze the global culture as a whole.
As a rule, cultural analytics focuses on one single source. For example, it could be Instagram, it could be an event site, or a particular type of event. For example, people analyze all theatrical performances, or all biennales. But even this narrow segment poses huge difficulties in terms of collecting data and transforming it into some comprehensible form.
Elsewhere's team came up with a solution to analyze the similar data. They analyzed both data structured by platforms and the unstructured description texts.
So the data which cultural institutions, museums, galleries, theaters put online, right? And on these networks, on these platforms, it's structured. So we already have dates, locations, but we also have texts, right? Every theater play is described in a few paragraphs, every exhibition. So we can use text analytics to analyze these texts, for example, to figure out what are a few hundred keywords which describe contemporary culture. Are we different from what we had 5 years ago?
Despite the fact that Elsewhere has just begun analyzing data, the early analysis has already given some interesting results. First, there are good reasons to rethink the global role of cultural biennales.
The Biennale is a great example of an event that becomes trend-setting.
The first International Art Biennale took place in Venice in 1895. By the year 1990, there have been just 37 international biennales in various countries, 74 by the year 2000, 127 by 2010, and 200 by 2018. The Biennale geography spread dramatically, outpacing the rise of global platforms, which means that these are the events that, more than others, push global culture forward. Second, the team has uncovered some countries that are more culturally globalized than their neighbors.
It turns out that some countries are outsiders. They're different from the neighboring countries and significantly rise above them, like South Africa and Kenya. Take Kazakhstan, which is growing very fast. The number of events there is growing at an incredible pace, and it is categorically different from the entire region of Central Asia.
The third interesting discovery is that since 2012-2013, there's been a dramatic rise of cities with a population of less than 1 million people popping up on the culture map.
The share of these small cities has increased multiple times. It has grown from 10% to 30% and more.
Not only are there more events, some cities, regions, and even countries can be seen specializing in certain types of events. Thus, big data helps uncover trends that cannot be seen otherwise. It can be likened to drawing the first geographic maps of the world.
When we place all these events on a map, when we place certain types of events on a map, stating the exact year, creating a dynamic map, we basically see a picture that no one has ever seen before.
The tools and technology of analysis used by Elsewhere can afterwards be applied to other languages and platforms. And one of the many practical sides of using data is to create tools that could help local cultural projects, groups, creators, and even areas improve their global visibility, and in doing so, to provide them with the tools that they can use to compare themselves with their counterparts in other countries without risking repetition.